Hey guys, Stealth here. In this deck review I'm looking at the deck that was sent in by IsraelFTW, and he wants to know if this French Airborne deck of his is any viable. He wants to use it in 10v10s, and he wants to use it aggressively attacking enemy positions with infantry. Now the real only position in a 10v10 that you can attack with infantry, and I'm thinking of Asgard here, are the blocks in the middle, where you have a lot of urban cover. Other positions, attacking them with infantry in a 10v10 like Asgard is very damn difficult because you don't have a lot of cover. Infantry cannot close the gaps fast enough. You don't have a lot of tanks. We do get a couple of very old AMX 13 harpoons, but that's about it. So I think that the mission statement for this deck initially isn't that good. If you want to use this thing in a 10v10, or if you want to use the French in a 10v10, either use a general French deck to make sure you have all sorts of units which you can use, because France in itself is a pretty well-rounded country. They have some well-rounded units, but they need pretty much all of the units that are in there. Limiting yourself to a Eurocorps deck, to an airborne deck, makes it a bit more difficult. If you want to go airborne, make sure you have a Eurocorps deck, because you will sacrifice 5 activation points. But you can, for example, get Fallschirmjäger, which are Fallschirmjägers, which are not exactly in here as the French. So what I would specify as a mission profile for this deck before we get into it is using this deck to attack in, say, up to 4v4 matches, 2v2 to 4v4. And then make sure that there are quite some urbanized areas in a map, because a map like Hope and Glory, where you don't have a lot of towns, is going to be very difficult for this deck to hold. Anyway, let's see what he has. First, when I'm looking at an airborne deck, the first thing I look at is what kind of helicopters he has, and then what kind of logistics he has. Because these helicopters, the HAD and the HAP version of the Tiger, are very hungry supply-wise. And supplying those with Puma 330Ls is not a good option. You need something like a FOB to keep those things going. So, going through this quickly, he has one group of command infantry and a Panther. That makes them pretty expensive, and while the Panther is a nice helicopter, I think we can use the Panther in an offensive role better with other units. Besides, we only get 4 Panthers with the command infantry, because we only get 4 of the command infantry. So instead I'm going to switch this back to a Puma 330H. It's not armed, well, it is armed, but with only a very light machine gun. And the only other command units that we have are VABs and P4Cs, but I think that with this we have a better option. And then I'm going to delete 1 card of Puma 330Ls and get 1 card of FOBs in, or a FOB. Make sure that we can at least resupply those helicopters and the infantry, because I saw a ton of ATGMs in here. Now these ATGMs are also quite hungry on the supplies, even as they're only ATGM line F2s. And the problem with these is that they only carry 6 missiles, so you're going to have to constantly ferry supplies to them if they are engaged in a heavy combat with, say, a group of tanks or a load of transports. Talking about these guys, he has all of them at low veterancy, only at hardened. Not recommended, because they don't have a good range. They don't have a good accuracy, a base accuracy of 40, and you don't need 20 ATGM units. So I'm going to delete both, and I'm going to start with adding in the better ATGM infantry. Now the way that I look at it is that the ATGM infantry is the infantry that's sort of a second wave. The first wave would be your Legionnaires, your Commando Marines, and possibly Mistrals. And then for the second wave, which is reinforcing the positioning that you've just captured, then you bring in the commando, not the commandos, the ATGM line F3s. So they don't need the Panther, you can just fly them in a Puma 330H. And these guys got better accuracy, 10% better, a little bit more armor penetration, but still that low range, so we need to make this shot count. So I decided to bring 5 of these in. I know it's not a lot, but you're gonna have to use that accuracy to the best of your ability. Then, for the rest, we're going to spam some more ATGM line F2s, even as they are not that good. They are using ATGMs, which do have a high armor penetration, and we can use those. So, let's bring in 7 more. Then, he has a very high amount of infantry in here. He has 14 Commando Marines, and these are all at the maximum veterancy. Now, these guys I would take in a different helicopter. And that will make them slightly more expensive, but only by 5 points. Now, for example, if you combine one pirate with a panther, you have the pirate for the autocannons, which is a nice support unit for infantry. And you have the panther with its rocket pods, those snabs which are mounted on the sides of the helicopter, to do some damage to transports, which they are much better at than these things, even though they have an armor penetration value. So what I'm going to do here is throw out one of these cards and get one card of panthers in. Now, he also has 20 legionnaires in here. These are not even at the maximum veterancy, so still there's way too much infantry in here. Let's see, we can get... these are fully upvetted, these are elite, but he decided to go with a lower veterancy to get possibly more pirates or more legionnaires. It's just that we don't need that many. So I'm going to upvet these guys, and that gives me 17. And that means that the legionnaires are going to be your frontline infantry, instead of having, for example, chasseurs. And I believe that, yeah, here they are. You can get those if you want to. You can get a lot more of these compared to the legionnaires, but we have enough slots here and enough activation points, so why not? He has a load of Mistrals. Too many as far as I'm concerned. I can usually do with 10 Mistrals. 14 is just too many, and if you upvet them a little bit more, you're also going to get more accuracy out of them. So deleting these and upvetting them. And finally he has 14 sappers, napalm infantry, or so-called engineers by some. And these guys again are at the lower veterancy, but I think that we can do with a higher veterancy and a lower amount of them. So this is the infantry section that I would go with. In support, we're going to see... oh wow, that's a load of mortars. Why would you want to have 14 mortars in here? These guys, by the way, have, I believe, the lowest dispersion of any mortar in the game, at least the base value, of 2275. It's because they only fire 60mm rounds, and they have a very, very high rate of fire of 22. And the problem is, they only carry 66 rounds. So this thing fires a couple of minutes and it's out of ammo. Also, the HE power is very low at only 2. So if you want to be using these, perfect, but make sure you use them in larger groups. What I would do here is get one card and bring in 10. The range is pretty low, that is something else you need to keep in mind, but if push comes to shove and you really want to use these in an offensive role, you can, because they do carry an autocannon. So if there is a wave of transports and you have nothing else, then you can use the AMX 6020 as well as an autocannon transport. Considering using the AML 60, but this thing is just even worse than the 6020. Next up, 14 Crotals. The Crotal has been buffed, but I still think that it is either too expensive or doesn't carry enough missiles. What I mean is that while the range is good, at 3300 meters these things can take down anything, and they're not even radar guided. Range against airplanes is decent, accuracy is pretty good with 60%, that used to be 40 when the game was released. The problem is that they only have 4 missiles, and that means that you will need to babysit these guys and make sure they keep getting missiles from your supply tab. He has a high number of them. What I would do here is bring either a lower number, so say 10 at the hardened veterancy, or take one card at 7 and take another card of VLRA Mistrals in case you're dealing with more helicopters. Because these things will run out of ammo a lot faster than the Mistrals, since the Mistrals carry 8 missiles versus 4 on the Cortal. Their accuracy is the same, 60% on both. The range is quite a bit different though. 2100 versus airplanes and 2600 versus helicopters. So that means you're going to be exactly at the same range as the helicopter that's going to be firing back at you with an ATGM. And then it's a question of who can take who down faster. And unfortunately the helicopter will usually win that. Because the helicopter is going to do an ATGM or fire an ATGM at you, which does about, well, let's say 13 armor penetration in the worst case. 25 armor penetration in the best case, where it has very, very high AT value. In that situation, the Mistral only needs to get hit once before it can, or actually when it's in range. So when you're both in range, the VLRA will fire 1 Mistral, maybe 2 if you're lucky. and the helicopter that's firing back at you will fire back with 1 ATGM, destroy your VLRA, and the helicopter will survive. The Crotal does not really have that problem, so in this situation I will be going with the Crotals, and also because I haven't used them in a while. And then, very happy that it's in here, the Caesar. Definitely one of my favorite artillery units in the game. It's fast in the sense that it has a high rate of fire. It has a great range, 33, almost 34 kilometers, and dispersion is very low. They do not carry that many rounds, so this is another reason why you would want to have a FOB in here to make sure that you can keep firing with these things. But these are excellent support units to put down smoke at long range, or to just pummel the enemy from afar so that your infantry will have an easier time moving in. Next up, he has 44 AMX harpoons, or harpons. These are pretty terrible tanks, and I would not take 44. I would just take one card of these and save myself a couple of activation points. With this, you still get, for 25 points, a vehicle that can be somewhat useful, in the sense that it can support you with this main gun, this SA-50. The problem that it has is low range, low accuracy, low armor penetration, low HE of only 2, a high rate of fire, a more or less low amount of autonomy for the type of vehicle. The ATGM that it carries is decent for a 25 point unit. It carries 4 of these. They have terrible accuracy, decent armor penetration, and a pretty low range. So the only real reason that you're using these is to go after light transports, because the moment you start going after a tank, there's a very, very high chance that you're not going to survive that. Reconnaissance, let's see, he has quite a high amount of gazelles and commandos here. The commandos are things that you definitely want to have in here. The reason for that is that they can be used both as reconnaissance units and as infantry, if you need them to. So regular assault infantry. They got very high values on both their battle rifle and their LMG, both 50 and 60% accuracy, although this I believe is a stationary weapon. I'm not entirely sure about that, but it doesn't carry a stat nor a CQC tag, so I'm not sure about this one. But they can also be used very effectively in counter-infantry operations. Definitely want to have 10 of them in here. You could go with a pirate if you wanted to give yourself another autocannon helicopter, but we got enough helicopters in the heli-tab to do that. Then he has 14 Gazelle reconnaissance helicopters, and that's just way too many. You don't need that many helicopters. Instead, I'm gonna get another tank, and this is actually a better tank than the tank that we can find in the tank section. It is cheaper, it has better range, it has better accuracy, better armor penetration, better HE, same rate of fire. It has the same amount of off-road autonomy and off-road speed, and armor is the same, but it carries good optics versus poor optics. So if you want to get tanks, make sure you get those in the reconnaissance section. And actually, I'm considering of just going with 2 of these, and then deleting the tanks in the harpoon or the tank section altogether, because we just don't really will be needing these. Further, he has this Gazelle. The Alouette is, I believe, slightly better if you compare them, in the sense that they have very good optics versus good optics. And as mentioned, you don't really need an autocannon on them. The speed on the Gazelle is a lot higher than that of the Alouette though. It's a difference of 100 kph, and that is significant because it means that some helicopters with AA missiles will be able to catch up to your Alouette. But the good thing is that the Alouette will see them coming, while the Gazelle might not. So this is really a personal preference, but I do prefer the Alouette. Next up, vehicles. He has a very high amount of Milan 2s here again. So he's really going for the ambush setup, and that is something that France does best. They're not really meant as straight up fighters unless you're using their infantry. But for one-on-one operations, the Milan, I don't think I will be needing or will be using this that much. And considering that he only spent 5 points in helicopters, we might be able to spend some more there. So I'm going to delete one of these. I won't be needing 20 of them. and these are nice fire support units, the ERC 90s. Combine these with, for example, the 1390, and you have something that can spot and has a decent gun and a very high rate of fire. And the same goes for the Sage, which has a higher armor penetration, lower rate of fire, but is way faster. And these things with a high autonomy and a high off-road speed can be really useful flankers. So definitely have the ERC 90 in your deck. So only a couple points spent here. We still have 5 points to spend. Let's see, he has upvetted these helicopters. Since the helicopters are the main strength of the French Airborne deck, along with the airplanes, you will be needing more. So I'm going to delete both and get them both at a higher veterancy. At a lower veterancy and a higher availability to make sure I have more of these Tigers. Because 2 of them is just too few. Let's see, he also has a Celtic in here. 5 of these. Let's go with another card of Celtics. He has 1 card of HOTS. So these are the AT variety of the helicopters. Let's go with another one of those, because they are really nice quick ambush helicopters. They are the Gazelle frames, so they travel at 310 kph. They fire off a couple of these HOT 2s, which have high accuracy, decent stabilizer, but especially a high armor penetration. And with them they can do a ton of damage very quickly. So if you have an armored push or you want to take out some tanks quickly, this is the unit to use. And then I'm actually missing the Cassiope in here. This is a very useful helicopter for supporting infantry as well, and to make sure that you can destroy vehicles quickly. They have an armor penetration of 3. That means they'll go through transports very quickly and very easily. It does not mean that they're going to go through tanks easily, but we got all of these Gazelles to do that. So let's go with, say 12. No, actually 8. I won't be needing 12. Gives me 1 more point, and considering that there are almost no more helicopters, I mean, I can get some basic Gazelle HOTS, but I don't need those. I would like to get another logistics unit in here, but that means I'd have to sacrifice a helicopter or some infantry, and I'd prefer not to do that. And unfortunately the air tab's full, so it looks like we're going to have to go with one of those Harpoon tanks anyway. Finally, in the air tab, he has 2 elite Rafale fighters, some of the best fighters in the game. And I believe that a value that is especially unusual for fighters is this one, medium stealth. They have less chance to be detected by the enemy, and that means more survivability and that you can get the element of surprise. So you can get these guys in at a very high speed, 1000 kph. They have exceptional air detection, 50% ECM, good turn radius, and some very nice missiles. They carry 6 short-range missiles and 4 long-range, all fire and forgets. And as far as I'm concerned, that makes the Rafale one of the most dangerous fighters in the game. And he has 2 of them at elite, so if you're facing this deck, beware. Then some Mirage 111Cs with the napalm bombs, definitely good versus infantry, nice to have in here. A couple of Super Etendard tank snipers, 2 at elite. So these things are well, almost guaranteed to hit, but I'm going to downvet them. I want 4 of them. 70% base accuracy is already very, very good. And if you hit 1 or 2 tanks, even if they're, especially if they're say 90 to 120 points, you're going to upvet these things very quickly to hardened, veteran, and even elite. And that's going to go pretty quickly because they are reloaded so fast. These things take, well, if they're not damaged, that is, almost no time to resupply. And that means that you can keep doing sorties with these Super Etendard SCMs to make sure you can keep pummeling the enemy tanks. Talking about pummeling enemy tanks and vehicles, there's also the Mirage F1CT with cluster bombs. I'm not sure why I'd want to upvet a bomber. This is just not a good use of the unit, because the unit is, as far as I'm concerned, just a delivery truck for that Beluga cluster bomb that you can see hanging under the wings. Since it's just a delivery vehicle, I don't need veterancy. It doesn't need to have higher, faster morale recovery, because hopefully it's only going to be there to deliver its bombs and then get out. It doesn't really need chance to identify enemy units, So let's just go with 2 of those. Then 2 Jaguars, super upfitted seaplanes. Nice to haves because you will be relying on these quite a bit, and making sure that they have a higher veterancy will mean that this missile is even more likely to hit. And having 2 of them is definitely nice to have. Mirage 2000C RDI, another ASF. These things are not as good as the Rafale, but don't underestimate these little buggers, because they do have some missiles that are going to do quite a bit of damage. They got the Super 530D, which has almost the same accuracy as the, say, the Super missile on the Rafale. It has a little bit less range, 700 less, and they unfortunately are semi-active. That means they are radar. They are radar guided in a sense. The missile needs to be, or the airplane needs to be, in the arena until the point of impact. So that's something that you need to know about these missiles. Otherwise, they are good dogfighters because they do carry 2 of these magic missiles. They got a pretty high ratio of ECM, 40%, exceptional air detection, and 1000 kph. Although, if you can bring in 2 Rafales, I don't really see why you'd want to have a couple of these in. I don't think that we have many other planes that we need. So in this situation I'm going to leave them in, but if you feel that you need to spend another point somewhere else, and actually I think I'm just going to do that. I'm going to delete these. I'm going to delete the tank, and then I'm going to get another logistics helicopter to make sure that I can resupply either my own units or my allies, because as I also highlighted in an earlier video I did on an airborne deck, you are fast at logistics. You have fast helicopters, you don't really need tons and tons of supplies, and you are one of the most useful decks in resupplying your friendlies. If you can resupply your allies, they can focus on the offensive more, because an airborne deck is a semi-support deck. They can do attacks on their own, but they're more of a take and hold strategy than an offensive unit. So then the only aircraft that I haven't covered yet is the Mirage 5F, which has 8 400 kilogram bombs, and these are nice all-rounders. With 8 400 kilogram bombs you're going to do a bit of carpet bombing. You can hit pretty much anything you want and do damage to it. Infantry in towns are still going to survive, usually. But these things are, well, they have a bit of ECM, they got a decent speed. They're nice to have, and they're really some of the only bombers that you get. You could go with the Super Etendar IVM if you want to, but these things are very slow. Have 10% ECM but only carry 2 of these bombs, where this one carries 8. So I would stick with this one. Let's see about the Naval tab. He has even more Commander Marines in here. And as far as I'm concerned, that's just way too much infantry, because we already have 63 units of infantry in there. Since you will usually be using planes from your plane section already, your airfield will be pretty full, and that means that in an airborne deck I will usually not go for more airplanes, because you just cannot stash them in game. Instead, either go for units that you cannot get, and that's for example tanks, but unfortunately we don't exactly get tanks. We get cavalry tanks, the AMX-10RC. These are nice to haves, but not really essential in an airborne deck. But I think that what we can be also quite useful for is bringing in more ships. So let's go with a Congo. Let's go with a couple of Lafayettes, 2 at Hardened. I'm going to go with an LCU to make sure that all of these ships can keep firing. And let's go with the Donghae. That's more or less my go-to ship, to make sure that if I'm getting close to enemy shores I can use the helicopter or the anti-helicopter and anti-airplane dual Amerlek 30 that this Donghae has. So this is the kind of setup that I would use in the Naval tab, but feel free to change this and bring in whatever you like. So that was a quick review of this French Airborne deck. If you want to use it, the deck code is in the description down below. And if you want to have a look at your deck, send it in. The link to sending it in is also in the description. Hope you liked watching this. If you did, please hit the like button down below and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And I will keep the Wargame videos coming, although I'm going to slowly build off this game as I'm going to work towards World of Warships a bit more. And I will be doing active aggression as soon as it comes out, and that might very well just completely start to replace Wargame. So, some Wargame videos for the coming months, but we'll see how the developments get. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.